for worship. And we're so grateful that so many of you are with us for this webinar. And just to begin of where things are, I want to start first say that I am deeply grateful for the leadership that we've had these past 6 weeks or 8 weeks, from my wardens and vestry, and from the many leaders that we have in the church that are lay people. I'm also incredibly grateful to my staff and my clergy for the incredible work that they have done. I think that when the history is written about this pandemic from the perspective of Christ Church Cranbrook, this history will find us having continued to be the church that God has called us to be, as a critical moment in our history when we learned that this church was more than the building. And we certainly have learned that these past 8 weeks. We are continuing to grow as a church, and we have new members that are joining us. And one of the things that we're trying to discern is exactly what that membership looks like when it is virtual rather than simply blended or in person. And it's my hope that we'll find something soon to kind of a place to be so that we understand where we're going. We've continued to serve as a church, which has been incredibly amazing. Over $150,000 has been dedicated to the responses that we are supporting to COVID-19. And this has been involved with supporting our frontline workers, food security, shelter, and now we're moving into financial insecurity. And I'm incredibly indebted to the Mission and Outreach Committee and to Pastor Manisha and the wonderful work that she's doing and leading that. I also am grateful to the ways in which we have been engaging and growing and meeting people and canvassing people and finding out who needs to be contacted. So there are that's been led by Father Chris and Jill and Bedness and so many people, and I'm grateful for the work that's been done there. And I also am grateful for the incredible work that we are doing for our children and youth. And one of the things that we're trying to negotiate with that particular ministry is to realize that our kids are being Zoomed to death like the rest of us. And so how do we stay present with them and to be life-giving with them? And from every indication, we're doing that work really, really well. I also finally want to thank our communications team as well, because I can't imagine putting more pressure on a department than we have to make this transition and make these changes. So in every respect, the church has been thriving in the mission that it's doing, and things are looking good despite the challenges that are in front of us with regard to our finances and the economy. The church is still being supported by people submitting their pledges, getting them in, and supporting the church in other ways, financial, and we're grateful for that. We continue to work on our capital campaign project, and we've recently made a hire of a owner's advocate, Bob Fermaso, and he has brought a lot of energy and organization and knowledge to the work we're doing. And so we're moving steadily to work on our biddable plans and to go through the necessary consultations and that we need to do to make sure that this new building that we're going to be putting in place is going to meet all of our needs now and in the future. And also that it's going to be sustainable by us. And I'm incredibly happy to tell you that I think things are going along very well there. We've had to iron out processes, and it's been asking us as leadership to juggle both the ministry and mission of this church and the work that we're doing on this capital campaign. And so I'm really grateful for my wardens and the work that they've been doing to iron out this process. I don't think we could be better led than having, a therapist and an engineer at this time. It's almost as if we were ready for this. So I am grateful for all of the leadership that we've had at this moment. I want to say a couple of things, and then we're going to turn to questions. And just like our webinars that have been so successful, I'm going to kind of be the MC of this meeting. You have an option to offer questions either through the chat boxes, which are in if you're a registered member, or you can, there's a place for you to ask a question as well. At the base of your screen, you'll see Q&A and chat. If you're looking at us from Facebook or from YouTube, just put it in the comment bar and not Facebook, sorry, YouTube. Just put it in the comment bar and it will find its way to us. Pastor Manisha is tracking that as well. So the couple of things I want to say is, as you know, on a political sphere, in the political area, we're in the midst of trying to figure out how to do a kind of phased reentry back into normal life, although using the term normal is maybe not the best. But somehow, and with some timing, we're trying to get ourselves back to where we were before this pandemic. And we've been given some leadership as well by our bishop, Bonnie Perry, and that leadership has articulated 3 phases for the way we can move back into the life that we had before the pandemic, or something like that. And the first phase is hiatus, and that's where we are right now, where the only people that can really be in the church for an extended period of time are me and my family. And then if sextons have to go in, or if anybody has to go in to do anything, it's a very task-driven kind of thing to take care of the building. We're now shifting into a second sphere. Exactly when that's going to happen is going to be determined by the bishop, and she will announce it, and we will have 10 days to get ourselves ready before it is implemented. But this next phase that we anticipate starting at some point in the near future is called reentry. And what reentry means is basically that the staff can come in and be part of things. Everybody who comes into the church has to be wearing a mask of some sort. Everybody who comes in has to be logged so that we can contact trace anybody who happens to get sick in any way connected to us. And there are some constraints upon there's no meetings that can happen at the church. There's no requirement that staff have to come to church, but just basically it's a kind of soft open for the offices. And we don't want volunteers coming into the offices either, because we want to make sure that we're being as safe as possible during that time. And this is what the bishop has directed us. And then there are some constraints upon our worship that have been put in place. We cannot, if we were to gather in person for worship, we could have no singing, because singing is seen as one of the catalysts for the virus, because when you sing, you kind of spray a little bit, and the aerosolization of the virus happens during that time. That everyone, including the worship leaders, have to wear a mask. There's no communion or Eucharist, no sharing in the body and blood of Christ through bread and wine, and that everybody has to be spaced out according to the dictates of social distancing, which is 6 feet, and we have a limit of only 50 people that can be in the church at any one time for a worship service. And then there's no congregating, there's no receiving line, there's no coffee hour, and everyone has to leave right after the service. And finally, there are, again, no in-person meetings at the church. So when I discuss this with my leadership here, with the wardens and the clergy and with the staff, we've realized that for us, phase 2 is going to be basically allowing the staff to have better access to the building. The reason being is this. We cannot, right now, we have a significant following online, and those online services have been able to be powerful and spiritually enriching and offer opportunities for interaction. And as we make some changes to our technology, we're going to be able to even broaden and deepen the kind of worship we can provide to you online. If we were to do worship that would be in line with the criteria that the bishop put out for phase 2, we would have to lead worship with a mask on, and that would be right now we feel that would be less than what we would want for worship. And so what we've decided to do is we're going to continue to do worship online. We're going to explore opportunities to have outdoor worship and to increase our outdoor activities, because one of the blessings that God has for us is we have an incredibly beautiful campus. And I've been doing some research on activities that will be appropriately socially distanced, but that will be enrichment activities. I can't make any guarantees at this time because everything is pretty fluid, but it's my hope that we can have an outdoor service of some sort. We could possibly do our carillon concerts again. It's possible that we could have some music outdoors as well. I've also had some conversation with a person who I think is he's spiritually grounded and is a spiritual director through Manresa, and he's also a yoga instructor. And so I was going to have him come and do some yoga in our area. And I've also been looking at how public parks are segmenting safe space, which is they're actually using the same kind of line marking that you would do in football to mark a line. They're making circles and saying this is where people can be. So all of those things are being explored because I think that we can begin to use our outdoors in accordance with the phase 2 constraints. And then phase 3, which is return. So we had first hiatus, second reentry, and third return. Return is going to be a movement back to church when we have communion. It will be in one kind. It will be of bread, and we're going to do our best to maintain good social distancing. This has been a challenging time for us because we've had to really think about how we are working together as the body of Christ right now. And I want you to know that we are continuing to listen to you, and we want to listen to you, and we want to answer any questions that we have that all of us will have. I can't guarantee you that I can give you a definitive answer today. I think that we'll all be, I will do my best to continue to protect the safety of everybody and to provide us with a way of staying on mission and doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, given what God has given us in this time and place. I am happy to answer questions. I do note that I've got a couple of wonderful responses that I see in the chat. I see that there's an agreement about keeping with our enhanced online platform. And I also hear that people are excited about the ideas of the outdoor possibilities. And it would be wonderful. It might be a way for us to continue to grow as a church, which we are doing a little bit less than we were, to be honest, but we're still growing, which is an amazing blessing. So without further ado, I'll just invite some questions. I have a couple here. This is, we are going to, just to say better, Elizabeth Adderley wanted to be clear. We will be continuing all of our virtual classes. And for the time being, everything is going to be virtually done until we move into phase 3. And then I'm going to, before I go to the other questions here, I want to ask a question from Becky Walton, which is, we have an anonymous group that meets at the church on Friday mornings, usually 20 to 25 people. Can we meet outside and not have to sign in? That's a good question, Becky. We want to protect the anonymity of people. I think the one thing you have to keep in mind is with 20 to 25 people, we would need you to do social distancing. And we'd also need you to be, because if you're going to be close enough to hear everybody, it might be a challenge. But we're willing to think with you about that, and we'll try to find a way to stay in touch. I also think that what we could do is work collaboratively with the chair of that meeting to have the log of that meeting stay under the chair's guidance. We don't need to know exactly who comes into a meeting until we need to know. And when we need to know, we need to know it in a hurry. So that will be an idea. I'm going to move back from the chat to the question and answers. And as these go, I want to say to my wonderful panelists here, I'm going to start to answer. Some of these are not what I would call hard questions. So but I promise I'm going to work them in. Jake Cooper asked, is there anything we can see details about the planned development for the capital campaign? That's a great question. We do have a web page for the capital campaign, which I would direct you to. If you go to our www.christchurchcranbrook.org, you'll see an update on where things stand there. And then Jake Cooper asked again, what about singing with a mask on? I have found that to be suboptimal, Jake, but I think you should try on your own and see what you think, and then get back to us, and we'll do it. Elizabeth Adderley says, no singing, no choir. Unfortunately, Elizabeth, for now, all of our choir singing is going to be by using our technology rather than being in person. Great. And then a final one is what sacraments are occurring. We will, to speak about both sacraments and sacramental services, we can do smaller services of weddings and funerals, as long as they stay socially distanced and are under 50. This is for phase 2. And even now we can be creative about things. One of the things that we've been doing is we've been doing wonderful services outdoors for kind of an enhanced committal service, and that's worked incredibly well. And we're also doing informal ways, but not the same kind of service that you're thinking of. We are in phase 2 allowed to baptize, and how we do that is going to be carefully done, and we'll probably have to cross that bridge when it comes. So we'll try to give you, but we are willing to kind of, we're thinking about that. I don't have a good strong answer for that right now. And then in phase 3, there I do believe there will be singing in phase 3 when that does come. So now I'm moving to, and I'm just going to ask for further comment on any of these, and I'm trying to summarize a document that has different phases and different stipulations. Pastor Manisha, Father Chris, have I missed a detail here?
I'm going to ask that we share with the group where they can actually see the actual document that was given by the bishop. So we'll throw that in the chat.
Excellent.
And therefore, you can understand the parameters that we're trying to deal with. There's been a question about having an opportunity for older people who don't use the technology to gather. The concern about that is, of course, the older population is the more vulnerable population. So, you know, I think that we would probably refrain from that until phase 3.
Yeah, and I want to move into a couple more questions along those lines. By putting that up, you know, you have to understand that we've had to interpret that to fit our context. if we were a smaller church in which we had an average attendance on Sundays of fewer than 50, in which our life together was such that we could somehow manage, which I'm not sure how many churches can get of that size, can actually be in the building at the same time. It may have made sense for us to live within the constraints that were being imposed. The thing that's happening is, thank God we continue to be a robust and dynamic church, and thank God these worship services are helping us grow and deepen our spirituality. And so it's hard to hold both at the same time, and so we've decided to go with one. I'm going to go to some questions here, and and Manisha has put up the document. Let me begin with Mel Carpenter, and then I'm going to shift over to the other ones for a bit. Mel asks, is there any insight into the September return to full worship set by the Roman Catholic Diocese of Detroit? I have to say, the Diocese of Detroit has their understanding of what constitutes safety. And for them, they don't believe that their priests have to wear masks, and they don't believe, they believe somehow that they can still distribute communion during this time as they move into the next phase. I, in good conscience, support the bishop when she says that that is not safe. Just everything I know scientifically, to me, suggests that if we were going to have a mask off over communion bread that is then consumed by people and touched by people, that would actually be extraordinarily problematic. And I don't mean to cast aspersions at our brothers and sisters in the Roman Catholic Church. I don't want to question their commitment to God. I don't want to question their good sense. I just want to say that I see things differently. And I have a responsibility to you to protect your safety. So I'm going to follow the bishop. I think she's giving great advice. I'm going to move to across the way. The one thing I will say before, we've got a lot of neat ideas about reentry, and then we have one person with Amy, and I'll ask Stephen to answer a couple of, just add a little bit. But Amy Ryberg writes that there's prediction of a lot of mental health fallout, and are we thinking about addressing this? And the answer is, we plan to have some time to think about what if this is all going to mean. And we're going to be planning some vestry retreat time, and we're going to be spending some time in retreat as a staff as we think about our programs along these lines. We don't have anything specific to say right now. Stephen?
Right. I would just add to what Bill said. We've talked as the wardens with Bill about, what is our life going to look like in 6, 9, 12 months. And certainly, like within the mental health field, it's understood that there is an anticipation of a significant increase in needs for mental health care. But we also know, besides that, there's going to be significant economic needs for a number of people. We also know, just sort of as we move through this process of trying to figure out, what's phase 2, what does phase 3, and once we're well into phase 3, at what point does it start to get to look a little bit more like what we know? Will it look like that? These are all questions that we're thinking about. And so vestry is going to take a very careful look at this. And as Father Bill said, we'll schedule a retreat sometime very soon to first and foremost just brainstorm about this and try to think about what are the many needs that we're going to be out there. And then I think as a parish to think about what's our role going to be in that. So I appreciate, Amy, you bringing that up.
And then as we shift over to the chat box, I want to take one question, which is, when will Pastor Manisha and Father Chris be able to preach? And I want to say that no one is more excited to hear from Father Chris and Pastor Manisha than myself. What we have to do is two things. We need to what we feel is that there's an interactivity to doing a live stream service, which is better than recorded. And so we want to continue with the live stream. And we're putting in place technology that's going to allow us to have a little more dynamism with our live stream camera so that we can actually have ways to splice in their sermons, even if they're not present at the church. But it's also my hope, and this is to get to the second thing, is that once we move into phase 2 and our clergy can come into the church besides me, that they will be leading services. In fact, I am really looking forward to taking a month off of preaching at least to let them lead us with their words and to do the kind of work that they can do so well. So I'm excited about that. And then let's go. I know we've got some good questions in the Q&A, but I want to go back to these incredible questions in the chat because so many of them have cut in. We've got 10 or 15. You all are so good at Zoom. Scott Donegan writes, have thoughts been given to holding a worship service at St. Dunstan's Greek Theater? Not yet is the answer. Good idea. Going to Ashley Kremheller, who asked us, when we get to reentry, have we thought about all families being designated for a specific service to ensure that we can social distance? I know that the 10 a.m. Sunday service is quite busy. We've thought about that, and it's a great idea. The problem is we understand the barriers that you're under to just get to church. And our concern is we don't want to ever be in a place where you don't quite get signed up at the right time or are designated at what time, and you come to church and somehow there isn't enough room. So that's what's been stopping us so far, but I don't want you to think that we are not concerned about this and are thinking this through. We're also been toying with the idea of maybe adding some services. And the one thing that we can do, which I should have said earlier, and I apologize for not saying it right out from the beginning, we can see that the church is open for personal prayer. And we're going to work to actually have that monitored and available to you so that you can go in for personal prayer and have some of that socially distanced time with God. Elizabeth Adderley supports trying to sing with a mask. Probably will sound muffled, but oh well. I think this could be Elizabeth and Jake, I think you guys really need to do some research on this. I think, there used to be like Hummer choruses, right? Where people would hum, right? Or whistle. We should imagine this as a way we could maybe have in the future. Who knows what's going to come out of this? But I think right now we're going to try to work with ways we don't have to have a mask. And, just to say, one of the ideas that I've been brainstorming with is I'm wondering if we could put some plexiglass up or something like that strategically so that we can have some safety and so fulfill the work of a mask in that way. Lisa Lawson is asking that, again, the singing with masks can be a bit harmful because of CO2 exchange and it will lead to a lot of dizziness. Lisa, that's a good point. I think a lot of people feel dizzy at church. It's usually because of my sermon, but this is good. We should avoid it. And then, are there any plans to provide more participation opportunities for our older members and those that may not have access to technology, either knowledge or hardware? Great point. We did do an incredible parish canvas in which we have done more than 700 people that we've reached out to. We probably will need to circle back and work with some of our older people. When we initially contacted them, they were among our most resilient. Everybody else was being rocked by this, but not the people over 75 were incredibly resilient. So let's make sure that we keep them up to date, just to make sure they're all plugged in. And Casey, I think first and foremost of Shirley, your mom, and making sure that she's got the connections she needs to be part of things. Moving down to Carolyn Russell. How about reaching out to help those who are computer challenged, maybe a small online webinar? We have been doing that informally, and maybe we do need to do that. Chris wants to add up something on that.
Yeah, just to follow up on that. That's been one of the questions that we've been asking folks as we call them at home to see how they're doing, to ask if there's anything we can pray for. We ask them, how have you been connecting to the church? Have you been accessing the Zoom calls? Have you been watching the services online? And whenever we find somebody who's been having challenges around that, we do connect them with somebody who will help them over the phone to either get connected or to get what they need to. And I can think of at least one parishioner who's never had an email account before. And she now owns an iPad, and she's been watching services online. She's now getting our emails, and she is participating in our Zoom calls in Bible study every week. So it's really been great in that regard. So yeah, we are trying to work with people to help them connect. And we also acknowledge that for some people that will always be a bridge too far. And so we are making every effort to identify who those folks are and to build if we have to, a phone ministry where we do check in on them and stay connected week in and week out.
And I want to just pick up on that and say one more thing. We've got 15 new questions, so we're going to keep on moving. But to give you one example, we've had one parishioner that was part of the 700 calls. For some reason, it's sticking in my mind. And they said, they just prefer being in person at church. And so they haven't followed church online. And my suspicion is that they're going to get to a point where they're going to want to try it. And so we're going to have to continue to reach out to them, because to answer another question quickly, we don't know how long phase 2 is going to go. And then frankly, we don't know if we're going to stay in phase 2 or move back to phase 1. There's no guarantee we're going to go from phase 2 to phase 3. What we do hope will be the case is that once we put in our enhanced audiovisual equipment and fully go online, that there'll be an opportunity for us to continue to enhance our worship than what we have right now. And that's going to be put in sometime in the next, we were supposed to have it last week. No aspersion to the people doing the great work for us. I think we should probably, somewhere in the next 6 weeks, we're going to have new AV equipment, and it's going to be magnificent. So
just to jump in real quickly,
yeah.
With the question, I too am somebody who is missing being there in person and to have the service as we usually know it. But I do think many of us are very conscientious of this, and particularly with, like as Father Bill said, with the enhanced sound system and video system we're about to put in. I do think we can move more in that direction to make it look a little bit more familiar to what we know. But again, we're living in a times where there's so much uncertainty, and maybe phase 3 will be here by September. Maybe we're back to phase 1. I think that's just an unfortunate reality of this.
To keep moving along, and thank you, Stephen. I think we've got some great ideas that are kind of corning up. Maybe adopting a senior and things like that. Right, our first move through our senior population was that they felt that they were doing well, but we need to be in touch with them. You're right. Another question that was raised by Alyssa Downs is that at a big church in Plymouth, they have started doing outdoor services like a drive-in movie style. You will not be surprised, perhaps, to know that I looked into that. And we've been looking at ways in which we could rent a screen or buy a screen that could help us to do kind of outdoor movies. A couple of things are inhibiting that. One is that the kind of screen we'd have to invest in would be one that could work during the day. And that's a significant investment, maybe more than we should do right now. And then we thought of doing a screen and doing like movie nights, but right now in the summertime with with nightfall happening, later and later and getting close to 9 o'clock, that's just getting a bit late for us. And we do have zoning ordinances that we have to be mindful of. So we can't actually just move into the movie theater business without realizing that there's going to be some challenges by our neighbors, and I think legitimate. So we did explore that, but right now it's not quite ready to go forward on. But I think it's a great question. Thanks, Manisha, for sharing, and thanks, Father Bill, for your support of the bishop's leadership. That's Lisa Lawson. Thank you, Lisa. I think Father Chris has been just as supportive, just to say, and as well as the wardens, just to be inclusive. We've all thought the bishop has been giving great leadership to us, and we're also there's some follow up on reaching out to those who are facing out on underlying conditions, but I think we've addressed that. And then something has come in. I'm not sure if I understand. It's from Marshall, #1. Father Bill, you told us you did not want to borrow to build, which I believe the congregation was comfortable with, but in fact, you have to borrow to build. Borrow? ? Marshall, I just don't understand your question. Is that it could be with regard to the capital campaign? And why don't I just ask Steve and Jim to give us a little update on the capital campaign?
Well, I'll say a few things, and Jim's a little bit more in the know with this. We continue to receive our contributions from the capital campaign, and thank you for everyone who remained faithful in that. And just as a side note, please continue to think about the church and support us during this time. We are meeting regularly. There is a special project committee, SPC, that has regular meetings to start talking, and we've been working very actively on our capital campaign. We have, as Father Bill said, an owner's advocate who is really, now they're on board for us to get the process going with inspections and other kinds of people we need at this point to get a sense of what it is that we're going to do. And we certainly are thinking a lot about the finances. We did have a very successful campaign, but at this point, we've really not made any kinds of decisions or have any clear direction on what we're going to do with our financing. I think we feel very good at our position right now. I think, Jim, maybe you might want to add a little bit to that.
Yes, the project's been going great with Bob Formisano on. He's helping to focus a lot of the ideas that are coming in. But when you look at our pledge campaign, right, it was people to contribute and have the option over 5 years. But we know the project, we'd like to finish it before 5 years. So all the money won't be in for 5 years. So there may be like a line of credit or something like that we're eventually going to have to look into. That again, it will be kind of a self-funding effort, right? Any interest paid on it, would come out of our pledges and so forth. So there's not any additional money that we would be asking for outside of the pledges for this project. So again, we've been looking at it very carefully. I'm a member of the finance committee, and I've worked on a lot of projects, both at Ford Motor Company and outside volunteer projects, and mapping out cash flow, making sure you have the cash flow for a project is very important. So we have key people looking at that, making sure we map it out. But it's typical of a project to have to do some sort of bridging when you're basing it off of a ultimate 5-year type plan of collecting the money that was pledged already.
And just to add, as we move into our other good questions, we certainly don't want, what we don't want to do is engage in any kind of bonding or anything like that. We need to, right now, people have been so faithful with their gifts to the capital campaign that we actually do have some built up. And then we have to take a look, as Jim was saying, about cash flow before we'll know where we are. And so we want to be very, very careful anytime we enter into any kind of line of credit or any kind of borrowing. And I think that's what I was trying to say when I said I'm not sure I said that, but I was just taking in good faith that I said something like that. It's true. I actually don't think you should ever go into debt if you can help it, except for very small projects like this. Although calling the project that we're doing small is perhaps a little bit of a misnomer. Let's keep going. Again, we're getting some good thoughts about technology, but I feel like we've done a good job with that. I think we've got some ideas about dial-in that we do provide for everybody. We also have, there's a good thing about our mental well-being and mental health. And then we've got some people who are offering themselves to care for those who need it. This is great. There are, again, just to keep on addressing, the virtual choir, just to say, they are actually joining us right now. We just have to record them and kind of put them in. I'm not sure if we're going to get so dynamic that people can sing and kind of have it immediately synthesized into the service. But the virtual choir is already part of the virtual services, and they would be part of things. We do, go ahead, Pastor.
I would just say that in terms of a virtual choir, it requires quite a bit of back work in audio processing and visual processing, and that's beyond the scope of our current staff, even though Christopher Wells has been extraordinary in figuring out how to push the limits and really learning enormously difficult technologies here during the pandemic. If you were part of the worship service, got to hear not just the beautiful organ and our beautiful cantor sing, but the violin accompany, and that was it was haunting and beautiful. That it requires a lot of work to do all these pieces, and we are still not able to get into the building as a staff, and also we're missing some important equipment that we are hoping to get in soon, as Father Bill mentioned. So all of that is a hope, but there's a lot of pieces that still need to be put together for all of it to happen.
And just to say, as we are going to be looking into this and hopefully adding this in a more dynamic way as soon as we get this technology up and running. And then I also want to say that we plan, this is from Lee, and I think someone said something similar about people who are older. Can we stream funeral services to help them stay safe? And just so you know, we've been doing that for the past 4 years. We have done funerals and weddings for people who haven't been able to travel to them. And with our enhanced capabilities, and I want to say, I am so grateful to past staff who saw this coming in a way. Peggy Dahlberg, who was our former director of communications, now being incredibly well led by Sarah Buckley, but Peggy was the one who got us online first and foremost, and she really did it in a way that was at a good price point and made sense for us. And had it not been for that initial far-reaching decision that we all did together a few years ago, we wouldn't have been so well positioned as we are today. I want to go and say, so I think that we are going to do that. We are going to have, I'm open to discussing, I wouldn't call them individual baptisms, but I'm open to discussing ways in which we can do baptisms that will be in line with the guidelines that we will have in phase 2. Many people have decided to kind of hold off, and we've been in touch with all those. And in about 2 hours, we're going to meet with everybody who is about to be baptized, and we'll talk with them. But by and large, most people want to wait until we're back in the church together. But we're happy to think about any good thought you have about that. Lisa Lawson says, thank you for acknowledging ambiguity and uncertainty in the phases. This is important to hear from our leaders. I have no way of being your rector than to be so authentically. And so I pledge you my transparency in all of this. And so I've never thought I could lead otherwise, and I'll never try to lead any way different than that. I'm moving through. There's some good commentary here on what we need to do. I'm just gonna. There's some people who are, yes, anything that you have any problems with connectivity or engagement, contact Father Chris. And someone asked if they could volunteer with the Capital Campaign. We are well staffed right now with that, with good lay leaders. But please, we'll have you, Jake, contact. Why don't you contact me, and I'll see you through there. And moving through to good answer regarding borrowing. By the way, Marshall #1, I'm so sorry. I knew you were saying something about the Capital Campaign. I just didn't quite understand it. And thank you for being so gracious and being patient with us. And then for the entire clergy, this is from Eric Linder, which means I think he'd like to hear from you, Pastor, and you, Father. For the entire clergy, office and support staff have accomplished near superhuman things this Lent and Easter. Nonetheless, I so hope that the congregation as a whole, and that's where it ends. I'm sure that it was, I think that I know this nevertheless is going to be really powerful, Eric, and take your time getting to us.
Well, after your sermon today, Bill, and what you presented, I was so really moved seeing what the parishioners are doing here. And I'm so grateful for what you all have done and given of your time for that. So I would say we've got some pretty superhuman people in our parish as well. And I'm really thankful for what you're doing.
Well, we are all, it's a team effort. Every time we do our online services, even though it's Claire and me in the church, it's like the moon landing with Houston in the background, coaching us through every step of the way. There's a couple of things over in Q&A. I'm so sorry, Eric, if you can type in the nevertheless, I hope. Does not lay on them the expectation that they can magically turn back the clock, pardon the hiccup. Yes, here's the thing about the present time and place that we're in. One of the things I know from having, at this point, I feel like I might be almost becoming an authority on pandemics, honestly, because I've read several books on the psychology of pandemics. I've read about the history of pandemics. I've read about all the issues around inequality and race that have come out of the pandemic. I've read about the effect of the pandemic on our social services. And what I can tell you is that historically, people want nothing so much as to return to the way things were. And I deeply sympathize with that. I want that too. I know that there are going to be things that are going to change. And I know they're going to have to live with a new reality because of this, possibly for a long time. And even if things return back to normal, we will have trauma because of this. We will be affected because of this. The people who didn't get a chance to graduate, who are heroes to me, those young people are going to carry that with them a little bit, and that's okay. And we're going to have to be compassionate towards one another. And we're going to have to develop our own skills for empathy, and we're going to have to learn to live well together in new ways, no matter what. So all of us want to go back, but we'll probably not be able to go back immediately. And then one of the things I have noticed is that the new normal is often a more resilient and wonderful place to be. Everything I've read is that when we go into a new normal, things are better and enhanced. For us, I think it's going to mean that our online capabilities are going to be enhanced over the next few years, and that we are going to have our reach broadened as a church and our spiritual life deepened as a church. So that's my deep hope. I want to go to a couple of things. Someone has asked about the revival of Pastor Joyce's Career Transition Network. We have been discussing that, and we've been thinking about what we can do. Right now, to be frank, we don't know what the economic fallout is. We know that some of you have experienced some incredible changes, and we've been lifting you up in prayer. And on an individual basis, I have been writing and making introductions for people to help them find jobs. And I'm still willing to do that. I think that we're going to have to do something like that. But right now, we don't know exactly which sector of the economy is being affected the most. And we'll do our best to minister to that. And thankfully, we have people like Jim Gorin, who just retired from Ford, or Mark Robinson. I can pick several people that we do have a lot of resources from people who can give you incredible coaching and have incredible connections. So we will be using you guys for that, most likely. There's an anonymous question that came in and said, you don't have to answer this, but I will. But do we have any idea of what will happen for Little Lambs this fall? And the answer is no. We do believe that God has called us to early childhood education. And we do believe in the mission of Little Lambs. And we believe that this is integral to the work of this church. But logically, if the economy opens up, the people who have jobs and have children are going to need places to put their children. So logically, we're going to have to figure out ways to care for our children so that people can work. However, there's going to be a lot of things that need to be thought through. Right now, one of the strictures for phase 2, as you all can see, and I should have mentioned, is that we have to be careful about having anybody who's over the age of 60 as an employee in the church. And so that is one of the things we have to keep in mind when we have children. We also know that children are affected by COVID-19 differently and in some cases severely. So we have to be really careful about infection. We also have to be aware of just how big of a class we're going to have when people come back and how sustainable it can be. And all of this is said with the understanding that Little Lambs has its own board and makes its own decisions. We have been in conversation about how to do this, but right now everything is going to depend as well on whether or not Bishop thinks our church can be opened. So it's in the past, we've been able to open and close Little Lambs based on pegging it with public schools. And if they're open, we're open. But right now, what we have to listen to is follow the lead of Bishop Bonnie and to know what she wants. And ultimately, this church belongs to the diocese. And so we can only do what we can do. And so we have to wait for her lead on that. Yes, Alyssa Downs asks a great question. Are there ways that you have thought of would be good for lay people to support one another based on the various needs you have seen emerging, whether emotionally, financially, medically, and etc.? I would encourage you, Alyssa, and you've been so amazing with Flowery Guild and the things that you do. I think you should contact Father Chris. And I would say the same to Jake, who is wanting to be confirmed that you be in touch with either Father Chris or Pastor Manisha for confirmation. I'm not 100% sure which one of you is running adult confirmation. Is that you, Father Chris? Yeah. So be in touch with Father Chris, and then will there be notifications in the weekly communicant about memorial services for parishioners? Yes, indeed. Right now, Claire, we're still in a kind of holding pattern, and so we're waiting to see how that's going to go. And then moving over to our comment question. Yes, Carolyn Russell has offered an excellent political commentary that would hope that we would have a new normal that would be different from the divisive old normal. Carolyn, I think that human nature is a topic of endless mystery to me. But I believe that I'm called to build our relationship with one another through Jesus. And that's how I can spend my best time in any normal. And then there are some things right now about job help that we can offer. Any of you right now for the near future, please contact me and we'll do our best to set something up soon if you need that kind of help. I think, do I have any other questions?
I think there was a question about phase 3 and singing.
Right, that was by Mark Robinson. And the answer is, I haven't spent enough time really examining what's going to happen in phase 3. I don't remember singing being forbidden in phase 3. So that's good news. Yeah. But I also think that I just don't think we should. I think the thing where we've got the most knowledge right now, and I speak this because this plan, these 3 phases, the parameters on them are likely to change even as we move forward. I could say this, it's my deep hope that we will be singing in phase 3. And it's my deep hope that we'll be singing together in church soon. Let me see if I've got everything. Anything that I've met? Have I missed anything? Couple have come in. How long will phase 2 last? We don't know. Yeah. So, and then again, another question about streaming funerals. We will do that happily. Any other questions? It looks like we might be closing in on finishing this town hall. I guess what I wanted, I want to say something carefully. We are continuing to move forward as a church, and we are learning again what it means to be called together and to do the work that God has given us to do. I want to encourage all of you who are here, all 85 of you, to explore a new ministry, do something new, and try something out. I also want you to continue to pray for one another and to lift each other up and to dig in deeper to find out who needs your prayers. And I also want you to open your eyes and open your ears. One thing that I would like to let you know is we're going to be having a meeting of our construction planning to make sure we think about any kinds of tiny micro adjustments that we might need to make to our building to adjust to the new realities of COVID-19 and other pandemics. And these are pretty small things because everything that we had planned to do with our expansion are actually needed now more than ever before. We were kind of a little tight before, and now we need more space so that we can spread out. But we're thinking about ways in which we can have seating that's appropriate. We're also thinking about ways in which we can make sure that the restrooms that we have are safe for people to use, and that will limit any kind of potential for contact with and transmission of any kind of virus. and we're doing our best to think through the challenges before us in a holistic way. So I want to say how incredibly grateful I am to all of you for being with us today. And we'll close in prayer in a moment. I want to say one last thing. I'm grateful for, I have friends who are bishops, and one of my dear friends is Bishop Rob Wright, who's in Atlanta. And I don't think I'm going to be breaking any kind of confidence by saying this, but one of the things he said to me is it has amazed him is what amazes him is not so much that big churches are thriving or that little churches are withering, that in fact, there's no rhyme or reason that he would have been able to see ahead of time that churches are able to adapt. He's seen churches that were going strong and are somehow unable to make the turn and to live into the new realities. And he's seen little churches that he thought were going to certainly be dead because of this pandemic, who have banded together and gotten creative and decided that they were going to be a church, and he's watched them soar. These little churches that he thought there was no way they could survive, they've soared. And that taught him that what makes a church able to negotiate things like this is they had a kind of adaptive, nimble approach to begin with. And for the past 5 years, we have become an incredibly adaptive, nimble congregation. We've been able to do new things and try new things. And we have been able to support ourselves in such a way that we are well positioned to ride out this challenge because we've been really, really careful about how we use our resources, and we've been unafraid to devote resources when they're needed, particularly to care for those who need caring, but also to lift up others and to lift up the community. And by the grace of God, God has blessed all of that. We are thriving now, not because we're big and not because we have resources. It's because we've been changed by God over these past few years. And we owe that thanks to you all for your wonderful ministries, for so many of you for joining us, and most of all, to God, who has decided for reasons that we will always be grateful to support and enliven and dwell with us and to lead this incredible church. So without further ado, I would like to ask, wait, what's this? What are you saying, Pastor? I would like to have Pastor Manisha close us with prayer.
I was pointing to Father Chris.
Oh, you didn't want to close us with prayer?
That
Well,
was right.
why don't both of you close us? Because we're all waiting for you all to just step up to the plate and start preaching. So maybe Father Chris, you open us, and then Pastor Manisha, you close us. It'll be very Baptist, but we're learning new things. So
It'd be a long prayer, you realize.
I know. I've realized there's risk involved.
Comfortable. Put on another pot of coffee. Here it comes.
I think you start.
Yeah, you're supposed to start, Chris.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that
Yeah,
part.
sorry.
The Lord be with you all.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Loving God, we give thanks for this. We give thanks for this day. We give thanks for this technology that's allowed us to continue to connect and to be together when we are physically apart. Give thanks for the extraordinary leadership of all of our clergy and staff and lay folks. Give thanks for your spirit that has been swirling amongst us over these last several weeks, causing us to connect in new ways, causing us to reach out in new ways, causing us to connect with our community and to serve and to give at a time of fear and scarcity, to give in new and extraordinary ways. Give thanks for the opportunity for this church to be a place of gathering for the wider community and even beyond the nation as we grapple with these topics of where does our faith play out in the midst of a collective trauma that we are going through. We give thanks for all the ways that we are seeing each other discover God, to discover our faith anew, to try on new practices, to try on new relationships, and to rekindle old ones. We give thanks for all of these things. And we know that we do it all, not alone, but always with you. I pass it over to my sister.
Lord, I thank you for this church and my brothers in ministry, and we end with some ancient words said long ago to God's people from the book of Colossians. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another. And if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you. So you also must forgive. And above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed we have been called in one body. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, guys. God bless you all. Wonderful to be with you all. And I think we're ready to close shop. Have a wonderful day.